On Monday, July 27, 2026, a chipmaker almost nobody outside China had heard of walked onto the Shanghai Stock Exchange and did something no one saw coming. Its stock opened, and within hours, exchange officials had to freeze trading multiple times just to slow it down. By the closing bell, shares were up 466% in a single day. Not over a year, not over a month, one day. The company is called CXMT, short for ChangXin Memory Technologies, and it just became the single most valuable publicly listed company in mainland China, bigger than the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, which had held that spot for years. If you'd bought in at the IPO price of 8.66 yuan, by the end of the day your shares were worth 49 yuan. That's not a typo. Here's what makes this stranger than your average hype stock. CXMT doesn't make apps. It doesn't make electric cars. It makes DRAM, the boring, unglamorous memory chips that sit inside your phone, your laptop, and every single server rack powering the current AI boom. And for over 2 decades, that entire global market has been carved up by just 3 companies, Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron, who together control roughly 90% of the world's DRAM supply. Nobody was supposed to be able to break into that club. Companies tried and died trying. Japan's Elpida went bankrupt. Germany's Chimanda collapsed. The barrier to entry was billions of dollars and decades of engineering knowledge that only 3 companies on Earth actually had. And then CXMT, founded in 2016, barely 10 years old, walked in and blew the doors off. Let's talk real numbers, because this is where it gets serious. CXMT raised 57.92 billion yuan in its IPO, that's about $8. 6 billion, making it the largest semiconductor listing in mainland Chinese history. By the end of its first trading day, its market cap hit 3.3 trillion yuan, which works out to roughly $488 billion. And it didn't stop there. By the end of that first week, shares had kept climbing, pushing the company's valuation up to 3.54 trillion yuan, or about $523 billion. And the reaction from the rest of the world's chip industry was immediate and brutal. On the same day CXMT surged, Micron Technology stock fell 5%. SanDisk dropped more than 12%. American-listed shares tied to SK Hynix fell 8.5%. Even ASML, the Dutch company that makes the extreme ultraviolet lithography machines that the entire chip industry depends on, lost more than 7% of its value in a single session. Think about that. A memory chip maker in Hefei, a city most Americans couldn't find on a map, triggered a sell-off that reached South Korea, the US, and the Netherlands, all in the same 24 hours. So why did the market panic like this? Because CXMT isn't some random speculative bet. It's the 4th largest DRAM producer on the planet, already holding about 7.67% of the global DRAM market as of 2025, according to its own IPO filing. That's real revenue, real production, real customers, not a story about future potential. And here's the number that should actually worry the incumbents. CXMT's guidance for the first half of 2026 puts revenue somewhere between 110 billion and 120 billion yuan, more than 7 times what it made the year before, with projected net profit between 66 billion and 75 billion yuan, a complete flip from an operating loss just 12 months earlier. In the first quarter alone, the company posted an operating profit of 35.43 billion yuan, compared to a 2.83 billion yuan operating loss in the same quarter a year prior. CXMT is still years behind Samsung and SK Hynix on the most advanced memory technology, particularly high bandwidth memory, or HBM, the specialized chips that power AI accelerators from companies like NVIDIA. This IPO didn't happen in a vacuum. It landed at the exact moment the global AI industry is starving for memory. Every new AI model, every new data center, every new generation of GPUs needs more DRAM than the last. And demand has been outpacing supply for the better part of 2 years. CXMT walked into that shortage with $6 billion in fresh capital, a filing that shows it's already profitable at scale. Watch what CXMT does with that $8.6 billion, and watch how fast Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron respond. That's where this story actually gets decided, not on IPO day, but in what happens next. For over 100 years, copper has run the wires in your walls, the cables under your streets, and the grid that powers your whole city. Now a lab in China has built a carbon fiber that beats copper on the one number that actually matters for weight and strength. But before you believe copper is finished, you need to hear what this fiber still cannot do, because that gap is bigger than most headlines admit. Copper became the king of electricity for a simple reason. It was never the best conductor on Earth. Silver actually beats it. But silver costs far too much to string across a whole country. Copper struck the right balance of good conductivity, low cost, and the ability to bend without breaking. That balance kept it in charge for over a century, and nobody had a real reason to replace it. That is starting to change because copper is running short. A study by S&P Global, published in January 2026, found that global copper demand is on track to hit 42 million metric tons by 2040. That is a 50% jump from where things stand today. The same study said the shortfall between how much copper the world needs and how much can be mined could reach 10 million metric tons by 2040. Copper prices already jumped 41% in 2025, the biggest single-year rise in more than 10 years. The reason is simple. Electric cars use about 3 times more copper than gas cars. Offshore wind turbines each need several tons of it. Data centers built for artificial intelligence need copper in every cable and every cooling system. And new mines take 10 to 15 years to go from discovery to production, so there is no fast fix. This is the moment a Chinese science team stepped in with something that sounds impossible. At the Shenyang National Laboratory for Material Science, part of the Institute of Metal Research under the Chinese Academy of Sciences in Liaoning Province, researchers spent years trying to solve a problem that had stumped scientists everywhere since 1991. That year, scientists discovered the carbon nanotube, a tube of carbon atoms rolled into a cylinder about 1 nanometer wide. For comparison, a human hair is about 100,000 nanometers thick. A single nanotube is about 100 times stronger than steel of the same size, and it can carry electricity better than almost anything humans have built. Here is the part that kept this material stuck in labs for over 20 years. 1 nanotube is amazing on its own. But when scientists tried to bundle thousands of them into a real fiber you could actually use, the tubes clumped and lost contact with each other. Together, they fall apart. The team at Shenyang finally cracked that problem. They took an existing method called dry jet wet spinning, where nanotube material gets pulled through a small air gap and then dropped into a bath that hardens it into a fiber. That single fix is what changed everything. In 2023, the team published a paper in the journal Ax Nano showing a fiber made of nanotubes coated in a thin layer of copper. That fiber hit a specific conductivity 56% higher than pure copper wire. In 2024, the same lab produced a pure double-walled carbon nanotube fiber with a conductivity of 1.1 times 10 to the 7th Siemens per meter. That is roughly 1/5 of copper's raw conductivity. But remember, this fiber weighs a fraction of what copper weighs. The tensile strength came in at 1.65 gigapascals, which matches or beats high-strength steel cable. Then, in April 2026, an international team published new results in the journal Science. By adding a chemical dopant to the fiber, they pushed conductivity to 2.415 times 10 to the 8th Siemens per meter. It is only getting stronger. So the real question is not whether copper's reign is over. It is how many years are left before the metal that built the modern world finally meets a rival strong enough to take its place. Apple just got terrible news. Huawei launched a new phone that costs half the price of an iPhone and beats it on almost every spec that matters. Inside sits 2 brand new chips, the Kirin 9020A and the Kirin 9020B. Chips built entirely inside China after America tried to cut Huawei off from chip technology forever. This is the phone causing real panic inside Apple's offices right now. And the story behind it is bigger than one smartphone launch. On November 6, 2025, Huawei opened pre-orders for the Mate 70 Air. Sales officially began on November 11, the same day as Singles Day, China's biggest shopping event of the year. That date was not picked by accident. Huawei wanted every eye in China on this phone during the 1 week when the whole country is already spending money. The price is where this story gets interesting. The Mate 70 Air starts at 4,199 yuan. That converts to about $580. For that price, buyers get a titanium frame, a 7-inch display, and a battery bigger than almost anything Apple has ever made. The iPhone 16 Pro Max costs more than double that price for a smaller screen and a smaller battery. Now here is the part that should not even be possible. The Mate 70 Air measures just 6.6 millimeters thick. That makes it the thinnest phone in the entire history of Huawei's Mate lineup. Normally, a thinner phone means a smaller battery. Every phone company on Earth has struggled with that trade-off for years. Huawei ignored the rule completely. Inside that thin body sits a 6,500 mAh battery. The iPhone 16 Pro Max carries about 4,400 mAh. That is a massive gap, and Huawei's phone is still thinner. The frame is built from aerospace-grade titanium, the same material Apple charges extra for on its Pro phones. It is covered in Kunlun glass for scratch protection and rated IP68 and IP69, meaning it survives dust, water, and daily abuse. The whole device weighs 208 grams. Flip it over, and the screen is a 7-inch AMOLED display. It runs at 120 Hz, hits 4,000 nits of peak brightness, and shows a resolution of 2760 by 1320. Compare that to the competition. The iPhone 16 Pro Max has a 6.9-inch screen. The Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra sits at 6.8 inches. Huawei just built the biggest screen in the flagship conversation and wrapped it inside the thinnest body on the market. But the screen and the battery are not even the real headline. The real headline is what is powering this phone. Huawei did not use one new chip. It used two. The 16GB memory model runs on the Kirin 9020A. The 12GB model runs on the Kirin 9020B. Both chips are made by SMIC, a Chinese chip maker, using a 7-nanometer process called N+2. Both chips are fully domestic.